It's time for a little bit of show and tell. I want to show you guys something really cool. This is an original Strat-O-Matic baseball game from 1976. It came with the complete original 1975 season, including the extra players. I bought it from one of the readers of my blog a few months ago. Now, this guy was the original owner and really took good care of these cards. Most of them look as new as when they were first printed. So I talked with this guy on the phone about it before I bought the game, and he told me all about how he and his friends used to play Strat-O-Matic in the lunchroom at school. Well, I'm guessing they didn't eat much food for lunch. Anyway, these cards look spotless for the most part, and though it's kind of hard for you to see, a significant number have a glossy finish, something that was famous in that original 1975 season. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this is because it's finally time for me to move up from the basic game. So today we're going to talk about the Strat-O-Matic Advanced Baseball game. This is the game that really changed the industry. Well, 1972 was a significant year for baseball in more ways than one. After all, it was that year that we first saw the Strat-O-Matic Advanced Baseball game. While this wasn't the first game to offer lefty-righty splits, it quickly became the best known, and it really had a major impact. Now, the Strat-O-Matic Advanced Baseball game was a game changer. I don't really think anybody disputes that. However, the story of how this game came about might kind of surprise you. It seems that this was mostly a reaction to a challenge from a pretty unlikely source. If you go back to the baseball sim industry in the late 1960s, you'll mostly see a two-horse race. It was all about APA and Strat-O-Matic as these ads in the 1966 edition of Street and Smith's Baseball Yearbook show. Now, Nagamco also had a game that was heavily advertised, as you can see here, but Nagamco had a reputation of being sort of the cheaper alternative to the bigger, more established games. You know, my understanding is that Nagamco used a spinner instead of dice, and that those spinners, of course, would always get stuck. Ethan Allen's All-Star Baseball had the same problem. I mean, the truth is that the industry of baseball sims in the late 60s was really a two-horse race, until another competitor entered, that is. Anyway, around the time all this was happening, Time Life wanted to get into the business. Time Life, of course, was the publisher of Sports Illustrated magazine, which was really making a name for itself in the 1960s. These graphics really don't look all that impressive today, but they were really impressive back then. Now, I've got to warn you in advance that the story I'm going to tell comes almost entirely from anecdotal evidence. I don't know of any documents that have survived to confirm this tale, so take the story with a grain of salt. So this book, 40 Years of APA by Robert Schmier, is one of the most important historical works on the APA game company. It was printed back in 1972, which means it's really as close to a contemporary account of this as we're going to get. Schmier reports that APA's founder, J. Richard Sides, apparently turned down a $650,000 offer in 1968 from an unknown company. Later, around 1969, Time Life made him an even better offer for his game. The idea was that Time Life would use Sports Illustrated and its other magazines to make extremely attractive and high-quality advertisements for APA's games. It would also use all sorts of advertising on radio and television to promote the products. The proposal would have also moved APA to a new, much more modern building, and would have included adjustments to allow APA's output to increase substantially. Well, the anecdotal evidence from other sources is that Time Life offered J. Richard Sides a cool $1 million for the rights to his games. This would be in addition to keeping him on as a salaried employee and as the head of the gaming division. That gives you an idea of just how well things were going for APA at that time. In the end, though, the board of directors decided to rescind the offer. Time Life decided instead to fund the production of their own game. Everybody moved on, Sites and APA moved to a brand new building, which sadly was sold off years ago, and Time Life decided to produce its own series of games under the Sports Illustrated brand. Now, as a side note, I should mention that Glenn Guzzo claims in his book that Hal Richmond received similar offers from Time Life throughout 1968, but that he turned them all down. Well, is it true? Is it false? We don't know. Glenn Guzzo's source for this apparently was Hal Richmond himself. Now, Hal's a good guy, but I do suspect that he has a tendency to modify history a little bit to make himself seem, a little more relevant than he might have been. The story that Richmond turned down Time Life's generous offer time and time again seems to me to be a little bit too good to be true. It gives me these strange vibes of like the wise old man warning the rich young upstarts about what's about to happen. But of course the story might also actually be true. I don't know, and I don't think that we're ever going to know really what happened. Anyway, Sports Illustrated came out with this game, Sports Illustrated Baseball, which was released in 1971. It looked amazing with full-color glossy parts. Now, there were a few odds and ends. For one thing, there were no individual player cards. Instead, there were these player sheets. I don't have a copy of them myself, but from what I've seen in pictures, it seems that the first version included sheets printed in a brochure style. The second version, released in 1972, had these big boards for each team. This is the version that you usually see online. In fact, fans of this game have created their own templates to make team boards that look just like the original. But it didn't last long. You see, the problem here is that Time Life thought that the market for these tabletop sports sims was much bigger than it actually was. And, well, when you start off by making the highest quality, full color, full glossy product that you can, you kind of need a lot of revenue to offset your costs. Apparently they didn't make that revenue, and we can see that just by looking at the advertisements and what happened. Okay, check this out. This advertisement for 4 new games comes from a toy hobby magazine from February 1971 and is the first advertisement of its kind that I know of for the Sports Illustrated games. Big thanks to Randy for spotting this and sending it along. Now this next one comes from the April 26, 1971 issue of Sports Illustrated. And as you can see, this is in full color and looks absolutely awesome. And at $9.95 for the complete game, the game was cheaper than the competition, which really is kind of amazing. Now, there are actually quite a few guys who got into this baseball sim industry because of full color ads like that one. There are other ads like that out there as well, though I didn't quite have the time to find all of them before making this video. Anyway, let me show you just how amazing that ad was. Most Strat ads looked like this one from the 1966 issue of Street and Smith's Baseball Yearbook. The same issue had this APA ad, which only took up half a page. By 1972, APA's chief advertisement looked like this, with only a single picture of a single card to show off. And Strat's ad looked like this time with no pictures of any game parts. Now, to be fair, APA did have color brochures like this, though you had to send away for them. Strat also had a nice looking color brochure. Those brochures are collector's items, by the way, especially if they're uncut. I mean, the one that I have has a hole cut out of it because the guy ordered the game. There's not a whole ton of this stuff still out there. But you know, there's a difference between having a black and white advertisement for a game in a magazine and having a full color advertisement. That's obvious. And there's also the fact that neither APA nor Strat really had much color to their actual games at all. Sports Illustrated, on the other hand, was color-coded. However, that original 1971 Sports Illustrated ad was really the height of the game's popularity. And note that it didn't come out until April 26, which is after the baseball season had already started. The 1971 Baseball Preview magazine, the one that all the baseball fans purchased, that came out on April 12th. Well, that surprised me when I learned about it at first. I spent some time digging through issue after issue of Sports Illustrated to see if I missed it. Nope. And that's one of the big mistakes that Time Life made. You see, both APA and Strat knew from experience that they needed to get the new cards printed and out of the door in time for spring training. Their customers were all making decisions based on those ads in Streets and Smiths and Baseball Digest and the season preview issue of the Sporting News. And I really don't understand how Sports Illustrated's team missed that part. You can see the same trend in Baseball Digest. So there was a similar Sports Illustrated ad in the April 1971 issue. I'm not sure if this ad was in color or not. My copy is from microfilm and naturally is in black and white. But you can see here that the lefty-righty splits were a big feature. Strat's ad in the same issue makes a big deal about the fact that Strat wasn't sold in stores, which perhaps was a preemptive way to ward off the challenge from Time Life. Anyway, jump forward to April 1972 and you'll see something even stranger. The Strat advertisement is still there and is still the same as the one in Street and Smiths. There's an APA advertisement as well. But there was no Sports Illustrated baseball ad. There wasn't one in the May 1972 issue of Baseball Digest either, and that's kind of strange, don't you think? Even in the pages of Sports Illustrated itself, that color ad disappeared pretty quickly. This was the first 1972 ad I could find. This is from the May 8th issue of Sports Illustrated. Not only is it in black and white, but it's really pretty nondescript. And of course, they missed the beginning of the season again. This ad ran in the May 7th, 1973 issue of Sports Illustrated. By this time, the focus of the ad was on the 400 greatest players of all time. There isn't anything here about the 1972 season, even though I know that Sports Illustrated printed it. That is really a worrying sign. Fans of these games are not really interested in playing only with the greatest players of all time or even the greatest teams of all time. The vast majority of us want to play a full season replay. And anyway, that spelled the death of the game. The game eventually went over to Avalon Hill. It survived for a few years, though the components look a lot cheaper than they used to. In the end, it was overshadowed by Status Pro Baseball, which Avalon Hill started to print in 1978. Status Pro is one of those great classic games that I still need to play. We will cover it eventually. Anyway, that's the end of Sports Illustrated Baseball, but why was the game so important? I mean, there was the gloss, yeah, but the real interesting part was that batters and pitchers were rated for their abilities against opponents who were left and right-handed. That was really the big selling point of the game. It's mentioned in the full-color advertisement, though you kind of have to read between the lines to understand it. Whoever did the marketing for this game for Time Life really should have been fired. Anyway, this is the game that really spurred Hal Richman into action. Now, Glenn Guzzo mentions that Richman likely had a working prototype of a lefty-righty system for his game as early as 1957. Of course, I've got no photographic evidence of that. However, there is a lot of evidence that Hal Richman was working on something. Now, we know that because he came out with the advanced game in 1972, in early 1972. Remember, Sports Illustrated's game didn't come out until almost May 1971. That didn't give Hal a whole lot of time to work up his version, did it? Okay, check this out. This is from the very first issue of the Strat-O-Matic Review, March 1971. This person proposes a system where players would have individual cards for facing left and right-handed opponents. Again, this is from the March 1971 issue of the Fanzine, which is actually before the Sports Illustrated game came out. And here's another letter from the May 1971 issue with a very similar request. Now, since it's May 1971, it's theoretically possible that this guy played the other game before sending this letter, though I really don't think that's likely. So do you see what I'm saying? There were fans of Strat-O-Matic who were calling for Richman to do something even before the Sports Illustrated game came out. So maybe they knew it was coming. Or maybe they knew through one source or another that Hal had actually been working on something special. Anyway, I think that there's a lot of evidence, either way, that Hal Richman had really been working on this for years. Anyway, in January 1972, the announcement of the new Strat-O-Matic Advanced Baseball game came out. The big news was that there would be cards with righty and lefty splits. Now, this is where Hal Richman's genius really shines through. Richman devised a system from the beginning that would allow him to combine both the basic and advanced games into a single product that would help him reduce printing costs and the trouble of sorting everything out, and it created a really attractive product for his customers, especially his new customers. The basic side of the cards was practically unchanged. In fact, it's been essentially the same to this day. The advanced side looks like this, with different results based upon the opponent's handedness. This percentage figure gives you a hint as to how often the players should play against opponents of each handedness. Well, I don't know about you guys, I'm really not a fan of using a percentage there. It seems kind of awkward to me. It seems to me that you'd be better off just tracking down original box scores for the original lineups, or these days going on Baseball Reference and doing some analysis to see what the managers actually did. Now, if you look closely, the cards really were quite different, especially for players with different split numbers. But the best part is that these cards are really easy to read and understand. In fact, they were exactly like the basic side cards with only a few slight differences. And if you play the original version, the key to the success of the advanced game was how simple it still was. I mean, it takes me as long to play the old version of the advanced game as it does to play the basic game. The second big addition was an endurance rating for pitchers. You can find that in the top right corner of the pitcher's cards. The rules behind the system are actually pretty generous. If they give up 3 hits and walks in a single inning after hitting the so-called point of weakness, then they become fatigued. Or if they give up 4 hits and walks in 2 innings after hitting the weak point, they also become fatigued. The difference is that all these results with dots to the right turn to singles. That's another brilliant system, by the way. It meant that Strat did not need to make separate columns or cards or whatever for fatigued pitchers. It was a simple and an elegant solution to an otherwise complex problem. Strat also added power ratings to hitters' cards to prevent weak hitters from hitting home runs off pitcher cards. This was either an N rating or a W rating, N for normal, W for weak. Some players had different ratings depending on what side the pitcher was pitching from. There was also an expanded bunting and hit and run system. You can see those ratings clearly on the cards. These are also really easy to understand and don't require difficult charts to figure out. Batters could now also be hit by a pitched ball, and it's amazing that it took a decade for that to be part of Strat-O-Matic. It's also crazy that it's still not part of the basic game. I mean, do you know that there are Strat-O-Matic players out there who recalculate all of the basic cards just to put the hit by pitch results in there? Strat also decided to create outfield throwing arm ratings. This was a single-digit number, either positive or negative. So if a runner wanted to advance a base on a base hit, you'd look up here at the speed rating. But you would also take into consideration the throwing rating of the outfielder. So a good outfielder like Fred Lynn might throw out quite a few base runners using this system. Additionally, pitcher cards now had fly ball B results that were followed by a question mark. That meant that the manager could decide whether to send the runner home on a potential sacrifice fly. You would use the same system to figure out if the guy was safe or out of the plate. And that was it. Seriously, that was the whole advanced game when it first came out. The changes were basic and easy and can be summarized really quickly. And of course, the game was a smash hit. Now, if you're familiar with today's Strat-O-Matic, you'll be a little puzzled. After all, there is an advanced fielding chart, right? Right, but it didn't come out until early 1978 for the 1977 season. This is also the year when the famous T rating for catchers was first introduced, where catchers could throw the ball away trying to catch base stealers. In fact, Hal Richmond and Strat-O-Matic have been constantly making updates to this game ever since 1972. That serves as a significant contrast to the basic game, which has been almost unchanged since 1963. For example, in 1982 there were complaints about Strat's stolen base system, which didn't result in guys with great stolen base ratings getting enough times caught stealing. Strat responded in early 1983 with the so-called supplementary steal system. This is actually my favorite system, and it's not as complicated as it looks. You have two checks. The first is rolling two six-sided dice and adding them together to see if the runner gets a good jump. So in this example, Smith attempts to steal with a good jump if the result is between an 8 and a 10. If it's an 11 or 12, however, he's thrown out stealing automatically. Now you get to the ratings part. If he gets a good jump, his stolen base rating is 19 chances out of 20 to steal. You then adjust that for whether the runner is being held on and what the catcher's throwing rating is. If he doesn't get the good jump though, you use this second number, which is a 14. Now, the rules say that you can decide not to steal if he doesn't get the jump. It's a great system, and it's a system that other games have adapted. The concept of getting a good jump is really brilliant. And though I know that these are kind of fighting words, you have to realize that the stolen base system in Appa's master game was a lot more complicated than this, and also a lot less accurate. I should also mention the advanced fielding chart, which looks like this. All players now have error ratings in addition to their normal fielding ratings. The top part of the chart is generally used to determine if it's a ground ball or a single, in other words, a range play. The bottom part, the error part, comes up when you roll in a certain range with the 20-sided die. You look up the error rating for the player on the chart, then roll the two six-sided dice again and see what the result is. Now this is where I have to criticize this game a little bit. You get an X-chart lookup, right? So you roll the 20-sided die once, like usual. But now, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 of the time, you've got to roll the dice again to see if there's an error. Now, I don't know about you, but this is starting to feel like overkill to me. Anyway, by the time early 1988 rolled around, Strat-O-Matic had come up with so many innovations that they started calling the most advanced version the Super Advanced game. Now this was kind of a marketing gimmick to allow them to claim to sell 3 games in one. The advanced game was basically frozen where it had been in 1987, and all the new work was focused on the Super Advanced game. That included things like this ballpark chart, which could turn home runs into fly balls and fly balls into home runs. That chart, by the way, meant adding a bunch of extra symbols to the cards. There was also a ballpark weather system that would further add or take away different types of base hits. This one was also differentiated for left and right-handed hitters. And the list just goes on. You might wonder why they would bother with this sort of thing. Well, the answer was competition once again. Now this time it wasn't Sports Illustrated, but it was yet another glossy looking game with a lot of complicated add-ons. Now, we don't know for sure, but I suspect that the creation of Pursue the Pennant in 1985 is what led to this. Now, Pursue the Pennant is not a bad game, though it does feel like Strat-O-Matic on steroids. It lives on today as Dynasty League Baseball, though it really is a lot more refined than the earliest version. The first edition of Pursue the Pennant looks absolutely fantastic, of course. Later versions had a much more subdued presentation, sort of like what happened to the Sports Illustrated game. Now, I've talked with Mike Sislinski multiple times. He's a great guy and I think he makes a great game. But this time around, I really think that Hal Richmond overreacted. I don't think that Pursue the Pennant was ever really going to give Strat-O-Matic any serious trouble. And, I mean, the company went out of business in the mid-1990s anyway. Now, Dynasty League Baseball is still around today. In my opinion, it's not really close to the top 5 in the industry, but you might think differently. But anyway, this marked the point of no return for the complexity of Strat-O-Matic's baseball game. Some of these rules, like throws from right field or left field to third base, are pretty simple and make a lot of sense. Some of these, like the cutoff man, are a little bit more complex. You've also got stuff like the catcher blocking the plate. There's a chance for an outfielder to rob a home run. Now that one means you need to know the height of the fence behind the outfielder, obviously. They also added pick-off and balk rules to the stealing system. This meant rolling the 20-sided die along with the normal rule to establish the base runner's lead. And that's not too bad, right? But then it gets worse. The box, wild pitches, and passed ball rule is where it gets to be a little bit too much in my opinion. So let's say you've got a runner on base. You roll 2 dice with the 20-sided die to check for a jump and a possible pickoff or a balk. Let's say the guy doesn't get the jump. Next, you roll the 3 6-sided dice as usual to pitch to the batter, but you roll the 20-sided die again along with it. If it's a 1, it might be a wild pitch. You have to look at the pitcher's wild pitch rating and roll the 20-sided die yet again. If it's a 2, it might be a balk or a passed ball, so you roll the white-sided die once to see which one it is. When you figure that out, you roll the 20-sided die yet again against the catcher's ratings. And then you've got what I think is the worst of all, which is the super advanced fielding chart. It's hard for me to even display this. This consists of 2 really big charts that are printed on cheap paper and folded together. To use them, you've got to roll all 3 6-sided dice and the 20-sided die. You add together the 3 6-sided dice to get a number from 3 to 18, which I think is the only time you do this in Strat-O-Matic baseball. The first thing you do is roll the 20-sided die though, and you check out the range section of the X chart. So that tells you which one of the things in the symbols chart that you're looking at. After all that, you check out the E rating and look at the corresponding 3 dice combination number that you get. That's that 3 through 18 thing. That will give you the other symbol. RP is a rare play, E1 is a 1-base error, and E2 is a 2-base error. Outfielders can commit errors on singles that allow the batter to reach third base. Anyway, the whole thing is incredibly complicated, and honestly, it gives me just a headache just to think about it. I mean, look at it. This is the original X-chart system. It's simple. You find the column, you roll the 20-sided die, you get the result. It was good enough for the advanced game in 1976. Now, I understand the advanced version. You've got some guys who have good range ratings, but who make a bunch of errors. I get it. But the super advanced version really, in my opinion, is overkill. And if you think about it, you might wind up rolling the 20-sided die over and over again if there are runners on base. So think about it this way. If you have a runner on first, maybe you roll once for the jump, so that's the 2 dice, and then the possible pickoff play or pitcher error, which is the 20-sided die. And then you roll the 3 6-sided dice like normal with the extra roll of the 20-sided die for the chance that there's a wild pitch or a passed ball. Say that you then get an X-chart roll. Now you've got to roll all 3 6-sided dice once again, as well as the 20-sided die one more time. And if this winds up being a fly ball to the left fielder, was that all worth it? And don't even bring in the possibility of like the wind blowing out or the ballpark doing something crazy to the result or whatever. It's a lot. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating this point a little bit, but I am a little bit perturbed that the answer to every single challenge seems to be more dice rolls. Systems like the supplementary stealing system work well because they involve something more than just a bunch of dice rolls. Is there seriously no way to integrate wild pitches and pass balls into the game than to add another roll of the dice to every single plate appearance? I also prefer the older and simpler approach to the X-Chart. Now, I do want to clarify, I don't mean to say that the Super Advanced game is bad at all or even somehow unrealistic. It's just that, in my opinion, it's kind of turned into a slog to play through. In my opinion, a lot of these improvements go way too far in sacrificing playability in the name of so-called accuracy. It's fine for maybe like a computer game, sure, but board games need to be more about being fun and playable and less about the constant dice rolls. Anyway, the Strat-O-Matic Advanced game was really awesome when it first came out. I love these old cards and I love the simplicity of the game. I'm not sure that I can say the same thing about the Super Advanced game though. It feels like the beautiful simplicity of the game has become unnecessarily complicated as the years have gone by. As for me, I'm more than happy just playing with the old 1976 version, thank you very much. Seriously, just looking at these cards makes me want to start a 1975 replay. Now, I know that a lot of these advanced rules are optional, and you can pick and choose what you actually want to play with. And in the end, it might be that I'm just an older school kind of guy. I kind of prefer systems where I'm rolling the dice maybe twice at max to get the result. That might be because I grew up with APA, who knows. Anyway, let me know of what you think about all of this down below.